This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
Thank you very much, Sadiketu. It's a pleasure co-leading with you as well. And yeah, we have a lot of fun together when we talk about the Dharma, when we talk about the teachings and practices. So thank you very much. I'm going to start invoking with an invocation of Padmasambhava. And it's an invocation by translated by Bhante Sangharakshita. Actually, yeah, could you put the light on? Thank you. That's great, lovely. Let me just start. Hung, to the northwest of the land of Urgen, on the calyx of a lotus flower. O wondrous, the highest siddhi has been attained. Thus Padmasambhava declares. O thou who art encircled with an entourage of Dakinis, following thy example will I work. Thou must come here to give me thy blessing. Guru, Padma, Siddhi, Hung. So those words were translated by Urgen Sangharakshita and with the help of Dada Rinpoche, both teachers of mine. And so who was Padmasambhava? We've been speaking about him all day in different ways, bringing him to our imaginations, bringing him alive. Really, he's a historical figure. So we don't, many of the figures that we have on our shrine, our beautiful shrine, often are sort of archetypal figures. But Padmasambhava is a historical figure born in India and appearing around the 8th century. This is what Bhante has to say, Sangharakshita has to say about Padmasambhava. He says he's one of the most remarkable figures in the entire history of Buddhism. Not only was he a great scholar and an accomplished debater and philosopher, he was also a formidable yogi, a great meditator, and a mystic. He was a great master of the occult sciences. And according to the tradition, he was also a magician, a great magician to be reckoned with. And I heard that he was a great dancer too. So, quite a man, I think. A really colourful figure in the fullest sense. In fact, one of the things that said about him, he was like the rainbow-bodied one. So if you think about somebody who's rainbow-bodied, it's like they express all the beautiful colours of the rainbow just in who they are. A real spiritual enlightened force that had a profound impact wherever he travelled to, and whose spiritual presence is mysteriously having an impact today, even in this very room. So his most famous episode was his stay. He travelled in lots of different places, but he went to Tibet. He'd been in India prior to that, in Bodh Gaya. Bodh Gaya is where the Buddha became enlightened, and I went to Bodh Gaya for the first time this year. A number of people from the centre and the order. We had an order convention there. And it's a remarkable place. It's a very poor place, actually, and it's very chaotic. But at the point that the centre where the Buddha actually was enlightened is vibrant. There's a spiritual energy there is palpable, and you can't help but be transformed by it. So that's where the Buddha became enlightened, and Padmasambhava was there before he was asked to go to Tibet. So why was he asked to go to Tibet? Well, he was asked to go because they were wanting, Buddhism had been established there maybe for 100 years. I say established, it'd been present there for about 100 years, but they were having a difficulty really enabling it to really be established, to take root. And what the story goes is that there were practitioners there, but there weren't any full-time, monastics. There weren't any great institutions. So it was sort of here and there. And of course, if you have something like that, it can easily die out, can't it? It's not actually going to be sustained. It's not actually going to have a deeply transformative influence on the whole society, on the whole culture. And so there's a king, King Trisondexon, and he was a fan, if you like, even a devotee of Buddhism. And he decided that he was going to make the difference. He was going to invite, the greats really to help establish Buddhism there. And he invited a monk, an abbot it's called Shantarachita. And Shantarachita was the abbot of the great Nalanda monastery. So they had thousands and thousands and thousands of monastics there. It was a hugely successful place in India. And of course, you invite the best. So he invited this abbot, who then came, and he gave many lectures, Shantarachita. He gave many lectures on metaphysics, on ethics, on the philosophy. And apparently the king and everyone was very impressed, thought it was great. But you see, already there was a learning here because it had been really successful in India. Of course, Buddhism had been in India for many centuries before that. So it had really taken root. And so what Shantarachita was doing was working. He was just developing it even more. But what happens when you go to a brand new place? What happens when you go to a different culture? What happens when you meet a different kind of land, different kind of energies, different kind of temperaments? Can you just take what worked there and plant it exactly the same somewhere else? Well, the answer is no. Good. So whilst the king was happy, think, he's really he knows his stuff. It's very well done. The king was happy. The people were impressed. Something strange began to happen. Strange and disturbing, because after some of his lectures, one of the king's palaces suddenly had a bolt of lightning that destroyed the palace. And after another, a great flood happened. And then an epidemic broke out amongst the people. And then harvests were destroyed. So they all looked to Shantarachita because he was the new presence. He was the one that was coming to help Buddhism land in Tibet. And there are people that were opposed to Buddhism there, because not everybody was in agreement with the king that Buddhism should come there. They said, look, since he's been here, doing all his lectures, look what's happened to us. The gods are not happy. The gods are not happy with the Dharma, with him and the Dharma. Of course, in our day, we might just say it was a coincidence, yeah? Like just a sort of that's superstitious, right? Of course, it's just happening. But when the other thing that happened was that they were trying to build a monastery. So they were kind of starting this monastery, making all kinds of efforts, and they'd go to bed and then wake up the next day, and all their efforts had been destroyed. There was just rubble where there'd once been some formations. And that happened again and again and again. So that brought it even closer home, in a sense. The actual thing, the actual project he's taken on is being undone. And this time it was the followers of the indigenous shamanic religion who said, look, this isn't working. Yeah, the demons are unhappy. The demons do not want Dharma here in this way. So Shantarachita, he was a bodhisattva. So he was already very advanced, in his path. And he understood. He said, well, yeah, he could see what was happening. He could see that it wasn't quite working. Something was missing. And he also knew that he didn't have what it took to make that difference. It needed a completely different approach. And that's when he said to King Tristan Detsen, we need Padmasambhava, invite him. So that's how Padmasambhava came to be invited to Tibet. And it's very interesting because you think, okay, he's in Bodh Gaya, he's doing whatever he's doing there. He's been invited. It's urgent. It's an urgent situation. But he didn't go straight there. It's very interesting. He basically went around all the different lands, sort of almost like circling Tibet. And he just began to work en route to there. And he was working and he was living in some of the cremation grounds. He was meeting all kinds of forces, all kinds of beings on his way. All kinds of beings and forces that were destructive. All kinds of beings and forces that were unruly. All kinds of beings and forces that were untamed. He was meeting them on his way. And here's a description of some, just in case you're he was meeting Maras and demons and Dakinis. And Dakinis we know Dakinis, there's some images there on the flags up there. And Dakinis, we talk about them as sky dancers, and they're kind of the creative, inspirational force that we need to live really, to really bring all of ourselves on the path. But actually, when they're not harnessed, they're unruly, they're untamed, and they actually can be destructive. So here is an example. This is Bhante again. So he said there were countless Dakinis. Some of them have eyes that dart out sun rays. Others give rise to thunderclaps and ride water buffaloes. Others hold sabres and have eyes which inflict harm. Others wear death's heads, one above the other, and ride tigers. Others wear corpses and ride lions. Others eat entrails and ride garudas. Others have flaming lances and ride jackals. Others, 5-faced, are steeped in a lake of blood. Goes on. Others in the numberless bands carry many generations of living beings. Others carry in their hands their own heads, which they have severed. Others carry in their hands their own hearts, which they've torn out. There are others who have made gaping wounds in their own bodies and who empty out and devour their own intestines and entrails. Their own intestines and entrails. There are others who hide and yet reveal their male or female sexual organs, riding horses, bulls, elephants, etc. So absolutely not for the faint-hearted and not something you see every day. And this is the point, he was engaging in the things that we don't see. He was engaging in the things that we shut out of our experience. We can't even have the imagination that they are there. It's engaging in what we find fearful, what we're fearful of, and what we would feel overwhelmed by. And what we don't want to associate with either. What we think, oh, that's not us. So he finally arrived in Tibet, and he didn't give any lectures. He didn't teach any meditation classes. He didn't talk about ethics. He went straight to meet the demons and the gods and got to work. So the gods and demons were not faced with the abbot. The abbot wasn't even, we don't hear about the abbot even being aware of them. Yeah, he's there wanting to work with the humans on the human level, on the level of awareness, on the level of the conscious mind. But Guru Padmasambhava, he goes in search of the gods and demons. He doesn't wait for them to appear. He goes in search of them. Because actually, these forces, these gods and demons, they often lurk beneath the surface. They certainly lurk beneath our surface of our own awareness. They hide in the shadows. The demons, they were coming out at night, weren't they, to dismantle the monastery. So that's already a symbolic indication that they come out of our unconscious when we're not aware, when we're kind of asleep. Then they'll emerge. And some only come out when they're threatened, when there's something that challenges them, when suddenly you become aware. So I imagine in his various escapades, some of these demons were coming out to see who this figure was that was actually able and ready to meet them. So who did they see? Well, this is a description. I mean, we've got this wonderful rupa on the shrine and the head. So there's many images of Padmasambhava, but this is Bante's image description of him. He's a tall, well-built Indian in the prime of his life, with the faintly mongoloid features, characteristics of the people of East Bengal. He has a drooping moustache and a little beard, and a hint of ferocity in his expression. He is dressed in princely robes and wears a lotus cap with a vulture's feather on the top. Sometimes he carries a skull cap filled with blood, sometimes a dagger, and sometimes a dorje, the diamond thunderbolt, the vajra. In the crook of his arm is a staff surmounted by 3 skulls, the Katvanga. We've got one on the shrine today. The images convey an impression of a remarkable figure, a supremely lively, virile, active and powerful person. You can't mistake Padmasambhava for anyone else. So the demons were suddenly, and the gods were suddenly like, well, who is he? He must have just been quite different. They didn't know, I imagine, how to engage with this figure because he was so multifaceted. So the story is, of course, that in the end, the gods and demons were fully converted. Some offered their support to the Dharma. Some were bound by oath. Some gave their hearts to Padmasambhava. He subdued others, and all the energies of the gods and demons were harnessed and transformed. So we have these 2 interesting figures. We have Shantarakshita, who the abbot, the kind of the monk, the abbot who is like wise, emotionally very positive. He's a bodhisattva, and he engages with the rational. He engages with the conceptual. He engages with the conscious, what we already know about ourselves. And then Padmasambhava, you have the figure of Padmasambhava, who engages with the unseen, the gods, the demons, the unseen forces, the forces that don't reveal themselves to the ordinary eye, to the conscious mind. And in some cases will do whatever it takes not to be seen, not to be discovered. There's another class of beings that he engages with, of course, and that's Maras. So many of you have heard of Maras. So in a way, so there's gods, there's demons, there's Maras. So who are they for us now? Sort of we started our story in 8th century India and Tibet, but what about 21st century Bethnal Green? What about 21st century London? Who are these Maras, gods and demons? And what does transformation look like for us? So let's start with Maras, because we're probably familiar with them. Mara means killing or destruction, and it's really the principle of destruction or prevention. And in Buddhism, there's 4 types of Maras that we talk about. So there's the Mara of the Lord of Death, and it's death. It's basically, the fact is we're here, and we don't know how long we've got. We don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know what point it's all going to suddenly end. And that causes a great amount of fear to the point where we block the whole thing out. where we just don't think about it because somehow or other it will sort itself out when it's that time. This great next part of our journey will just happen at some point. It really is fear that's underneath that. And it's the fear of change in general. It's the fear of impermanence. In a way, it's our greatest teacher. Impermanence is our greatest teacher. Change is our greatest teacher because it shows that we're not in control. We're not fully in control of our experience. We can think we are. We can plan all these things out, but then, it could be anything. It could be the weather. We could plan to go, out for the day in the countryside, and it's pouring of rain. We're not in control, and we're certainly not in control of, how our life necessarily is going to sort of end and how it's going to, move through. So in a way, this is the Mara that got me on the path. It's actually been a helpful Mara for me, because even though I'm still learning around impermanence, I'm still learning around death. The fact is, without this, I would have probably carried on sort of, having my things my plans and my 5-year plan and my 10-year plan, and hopefully at one stage it'll just all work itself out. But suddenly I was faced with Mara of death. I was faced with the fact of, I don't know actually how long I got. I was in a plane, incident, and suddenly it was like, God, this could be it. And I was confronted with it, and it sort of forced me to ask some deeper questions about who I was and what life was really about. And I came out of that experience with some very important questions. How do I live so that, when death comes, I can die without regret? And how do I love? Those were the 2 questions that came out of that. So it's been and continues to be a very powerful Mara for me to engage with again and again. And then we have the Mara of the aggregates. So what are the aggregates? Well, this is our form, our very physical form. It's also our senses, our perceptions, our mental states even. So, we might think, I'll have to come to terms with the fact that I'm not going to be here forever in this form. But we're very attached to our form. We think this is us. Yeah, I'm this shape. I think these kind of thoughts. I look at the world in this kind of way. That is who I am. So we can't imagine that that's not the case. It's very hard for us to think outside of the form that we're attached to. But are we our form? Are we our senses, our hearing? Are we our fluctuating mental states? Are we the physical form that we're in? This is a really important question just to mull over every now and again. Is this it? Am I identified with this form, or is there something more than this? So this is a Mara that comes for us. And again, it's not one that we often, unless we're meditating, and coming up and this is coming up in our meditation and studying the teachings, it's not one that we'll ordinarily necessarily think about unless there's, again, a major challenge. So ill health often brings this Mara into consciousness, because am I this illness that I have right now? Is there more to me than this? Yeah. The more we see that we're more than our form, our senses, the more we engage with that Mara and learn to overcome it as a fear and as a central sort of delusion. And then I think this next Mara is one that I think we're probably more familiar with, and it's the Mara of destructive emotions. So, and this is just habitual patterns that we can get in our everyday experience. So we can be sort of quite happy going about our business, and somebody says something to us we don't like, and suddenly, the Mara of, low self-esteem comes up, or the Mara of disappointment comes up. So we're familiar with these kind of emotional states and our habits a bit more. Sometimes this is what gets us on the path as well, because we think, I'm getting a lot of anxiety. How do I work with my anxiety? We know we don't want that, so we start meditating. I think these Maras, they're often very specific. We can begin through practice to really identify them, learn more about them. because they'll trip us up again and again, and they'll constrict our experience again and again. And so this is how you work with and transform this Mara, by getting to know these very specific sort of, it might be a view, it might be an idea about ourselves or others or the world that keeps clouding our experience. So just getting to know these Maras and realise, it's not, they just come in. You know, they might have come in from some time in our lives, but actually they're not us either. They're not essentially who we are. So we can get to know that and go, that's just Mara coming in and undermining our experience. And love is what really helps us meet all the Maras, of course, and this one particularly, love and awareness. So seeing them a bit more clearly helps us overcome them. And then we have the Maras of the son of the gods. So this is interesting, this one. And this Mara is our habit of being comfortable, sort of attached to sensual pleasure, desire, but also just our general comfort zone, not wanting to be outside our comfort zone. And this Mara says, don't change. Just keep things as they are. You've done enough work, surely. Don't have to go any further. You know, you're doing great. Just do a little bit more, but not too much. Well, you're laughing because it feels really familiar, right? And I certainly don't like, at what point is it all going to be easy? Because I've had some hard times already and I've transformed a lot. At some point, it should all settle down. Yeah. Or it's the Mara of like, I've got my life just how it is, just how I want it. Yeah. Nice this, good that. It's all working well. Let's keep it as it is. So how do we work with this Mara? And this Mara, and it's in a way, I really sort of understand this Mara because it's theirs familiar. And at the same time, I've had to learn that this Mara is actually stopping me from actually, becoming who I truly am. Because it's wanting me to identify with the past, in a sense, the present and the past. Well, this is how I've been. So as long as I keep, within this confines, I know my experience. Whereas this Mara says, just keep within that. Whereas actually, if we were really wanting to discover who we truly are, we wouldn't be listening to that Mara. We'd be saying, actually, yes, I've done well. Great, I have done well. And I am pleased with my progress. Thank you. But there's more. There's more. There's actually a thing called enlightenment. What's that? What would it be like to move towards that? Even if we can't relate to enlightenment, there's a thing called insight, where I see things as they truly are. What would it mean to move towards that? And there's a thing called the great love, where I see no real separation between me and others, where I truly care about another as if it was myself. What would it be to move towards that? The Mara of the Son of Gods go, don't, that's too much. Don't think about all of that. Yeah? But all with this Mara, all we have to do is recognise it's there, recognise it's holding us back, and just keep going. Recognise and keep going. Keep your eyes on the prize, as it were. And remember that all things change. And change can be a positive. The fact of that is it can be a positive for us. Because you want to change. You want to go with the forces of positive change. So these are the Maras. And we have a great example of how working with these Maras with the Buddha himself, because we have the story of the Buddha right when he was about to become enlightened, sitting under a tree. So he really had done a lot of the work. There was hardly much for him to do. He was about to break through and completely overcome the sort of cycles of rebirth and death. So he was out on the pinnacle, and Mara was still there. And Mara came in these different forms. Mara came with the forces of destructive habit. He came with the armies of violence and anger and fear. And of course, the Buddha, we know as the weapons came towards the Buddha, they just fell into flowers around him. And then Mara came with seduction, with the kind of, hey, you know, just have a break, you know, relax, yeah. And that came in the form of the Mara's sensuous daughters. And then Mara comes whispering and say, who are you, by the way? What makes you think you're going to be the one to become enlightened? So that is the Mara of doubt, and it came in that form. And what the Buddha did there was just touch the earth and said, the earth is my witness. So he called the earth. He didn't look to the skies. He called the earth because the earth had witnessed all his experience and could say he has practiced, he is ready, he has done the work, and he's ready to break free. So these are the Maras. And we talk about Maras, we talk about their habits, we talk about limiting beliefs, we talk about negative emotions. These things we are familiar with. Even in everyday culture, we're familiar with these. But what about demons? I don't think we talk about demons very much. Does anyone, hands up if you talk about demons in your everyday everyday life? Couple of hands. A few.
Once a week.
Once a week, good. So we don't talk about demons very much in this culture, but and I think that might be to do with the fact that, you know, we've been in a sort of theocratic Christian culture where, certainly for me, you know, there was talk of the devil growing. That was a bit more like, you know, that was sometimes talked about. And the devil is like a personification of evil. And it's really sort of tied up with a sort of religion, if you like, and Christianity. The problem with that is you've got this personification of evil and no one wants to identify with that. Yeah. Most people. And you just never know, but I think most people. But the problem with that is that you've got the devil on the one hand and angels on the other. You've got the good and bad. You've got saint and sinner. You've got these poles of experience, right and wrong. You've got the kind of earth and the earth and the underworld and the sky. You've got even the spirit, and then the density and physicality of the body. And they all seem quite far apart. And what that means is that we're often in conflict. Well, which one are we really, you know, which one are we? Which one are we going to go towards? And we end up either oscillating from one to the other, or we're pushing one away, not wanting to identify with it. So actually, that means that we're at war on some level with ourselves. There's this ongoing tension, you know, between, you know, high and low, yeah, good and bad, you know. And for the Dharma, that actually doesn't actually work, being in that constant tension, being at war with ourselves in that way. And it's like, for me, I was thinking about this, it's like the nightmare that you have where, you know, so you're being chased by something and you just keep running. Yeah, you just keep running, and it's actually a real effort. Because, you know, even if, you know, you wake up from the dream, you have a dream another time and you're running again. And then if you're practicing, if there's awareness that comes in, if metta comes in, one day you think, maybe I can turn and look what I'm actually running from. And it might be scary. You might turn and look and see what you're running from. But then you think, but maybe there's something I need to learn. Maybe there's something I can see. Maybe I can engage with this in some way. And then actually what happens is you get to know actually a part of yourself, because it's one's own psyche, yeah? Or it's just energy that's playing out and manifesting in that way. So we want to be able to turn towards, look at what's going on in our experience, because it's part of our experience. So yeah, the demons can be frightening, but what demons do, they hold things in place. So you've got Maras that are very specific. Maras are like, well, maybe you get a bit irritable, maybe you've got a bit of a temper, maybe, you've got some kind of habit that you don't like. So we can really see these specific Maras. Demons, I see demons as like a number of Maras all rolled in one, yeah? And they hold things in place. So in the story, they're holding it into the story of Tibet, they're holding in place their sense of ownership. They're saying, this land's ours. They're saying, you haven't got permission to come here. This is to Santarakshita. We haven't given you permission for the Dharma to come here. We have an agreement with the indigenous shamans of this land. Who are you? So the demons are holding things in place. And it's like psychologically for us, it's like it's like a big no-go area. Yeah, there's a big sign that says you can't come here. It's like a massive boulder that's put in place. That's the kind of energy of a demon. And they don't want you to move forward because actually they want control. It's a control. It's like, this is how things are. This is how it's been. You're not moving forward. And so if you find yourself like thinking, I just feel stuck, really, really stuck. Or you feel, some things just come and completely overwhelm you, or deeply sabotage your efforts. It could be a demon. It could be that energy, that force that says you are not going to move beyond this kind of zone that we've given you, as it were. So what these demons keep things in place, and it controls us, keeps us in check, keeps us even from imagining more of ourselves, imagining more of who we are truly. Because of course in Buddhism we say that we're intrinsically pure. Our minds are illumined minds, bright, scintillating. We have these hearts that can be vastly open with metta. That's what the Dharma says that we really are as human beings, covered over though by all our conditioning, all our ideas and views. So the demons are like, yes, we don't want you to see any of that. We want you to stay as things are. So Bhante says these demons, they're not just mythological figures in the story, but they're forces within the human mind itself at a very deep level, to be found not only within the individual mind, but where the individual mind ends and the collective mind, the collective consciousness, the collective unconsciousness begins. So this is really important, because it's if you're thinking, oh my God, how many demons have I got, lurking around? Oh, it doesn't sound very nice. The fact is, it's just what the mind does, and every single human being will have its own particular ones, but it's because it's like there within the human psyche. It's a collective experience, as it were. It's not actually personal necessarily to us, if that makes sense. It's just like there's light, sunlight, there's dark. It's just as impersonal as that in a way, although we'll have our own particular sort of versions of them. So we all have demons. That's the thing. It's part of being human, part of being human, and part of the world. So we have personal demons, as it were, but then there's these collective demons as well. I was driving on Thursday, about 15-20 minutes from where I lived, and I sort of drove into an area, and I saw all these flags. These are British flags. I thought, oh, what's the celebration? I haven't been watching TV very much recently. Oh, what's the celebration? And then I started feeling really uncomfortable, and I couldn't work out why, because they were on every single lamppost. And I thought, gosh, even when we have celebrations, it's not as, usually as full as that. And then I read some of the slogans. And my heart sank. And it took me right back to when I was growing up, whereby, a flag was a hostile act. Was something that meant that I and other people like me were not welcome. And it was really strange driving, because it was everywhere, the town square, everywhere, and it was really strange driving, because I thought I was just 15 minutes down the road and everything was normal, and now I've come into this place and I don't know where I am anymore, and I could feel a very old fear arising in my being. Because that used to be my response growing up, a sort of very old, I had a fear. And I realised I hadn't felt that for a very long time. And then I had to work with it. I had to kind of think, okay, how do I respond here? Because in the past, I used to find myself getting fearful and then angry and then, not knowing what to do. But I thought, gosh, I've been practicing now for, many years. What's my response now to this? Well, I mean, in a way, I had to, find that response, because it was a bit shocking. So I had to find that response. And I think the main response that came was just one of sadness. I was just, here it's the rhetoric of division. Here it's the rhetoric of separation. We're not able to just engage with each other as fellow sort of human beings here. And of course, it made me, actually, I rang a friend when I got back, and I was like, I can't wait to come back to the LBC because, actually I drove back into my area and I drove to another part of London later that day, and it was all fine. And then I remembered, I thought, gosh, yeah, the LBC, the London Buddhist Centre, and the community around here, everyone's welcome, and we're here to develop friendships and connection with whoever is here, not based on status or caste, or race, or nationality, or culture. We're here to actually help each other grow, become friends with each other. That is the essence of a spiritual community. And Bhante thought about this years ago, and he said, it's really interesting coming to what Bhante said. He said, something else, he says, I've been very concerned and pained about recently is the question of racial prejudice and discrimination. He says, if you'd asked me a few years ago whether racial prejudice and discrimination was on decline in Britain, I would have said, yes, it certainly is. And it won't be many years before it disappears altogether. But he says, I don't think I could say that today. He said, in the last few months, I've read in the newspaper so many reports of cases of harassment that I've come to the conclusion that as a movement, and especially as an order, we need to take a much more active part in combating prejudice and discrimination. Or that goes to say, he says, that the order and movement to do whatever we can to remove such prejudice from the society in which our movement functions. We can't just look the other way, he says. So that was actually reassuring. I knew that's, because Bhante also says that for him being a Buddhist is being able to make friends with any other human being. That's his essence of what being a Buddhist is. So it was great reading it just after having that experience. And why am I talking about it? Because it's a demon. It's a views that have sort of coalesced and actually have a real effect on many people. And when you have a demon, sometimes it has a life of its own. It kind of can have quite an influence just because it becomes the more people that subscribe to certain views, and this is any extreme views on any side, yeah. The more people subscribe to it, the more energy it gets, and the more it has a life and can sort of sweep across the land, as it were. So that's why Bhante, I think, really sort of talked about it, nailed it, as it were, as one of them. But he talked about other ones as well, like capitalism, rampant capitalism, where adverts are every 5 minutes, and you get used to just adverts happening every 5 minutes, and we just think, oh yeah, that's just how it is. Fast fashion, is another one. We just got used to things being cheap, clothes being cheap in a sense, and the not wanting to see the suffering at the other end of it. The environment, the destruction of the environment. There's many, many different kind of demons. And the thing about demons is that they're often lurking, as I said before, in the shadows until the conditions come into being, or until they feel threatened in some way. And it made me think that, 2020. Gosh, when I look back at 2020, I think, what a strange time that was. But there was something that happened in 2020 whereby I think it was a tough time for many people, lots of suffering. And at the same time, things slowed right down. For most of us, our lives slowed right down, and we began to reflect more. And in some ways, even if it was just for a few moments, we began to feel more in solidarity with others. And it didn't last, but it was there. And millions and billions of people sort of took part in that for a few moments. I think that had quite an effect in a way. But maybe the Maras have been threatened, the demons have been threatened, if you like, by progress, by change. And they come out in force then. So that happens for collectively, as I've just spoke about, but it also happens individually, personally. So this also happens if, you're making great progress. You're doing, you're really doing well. And then suddenly there's like the brakes get put on. Yeah. And just like you're not sure how to move forward. That's the Mara coming out, feeling threatened by your progress. And I say, keep going. It's like a good sign in a sense when it happens personally, because it's like, oh, change is really occurring. Your deeper drives, your deeper energies are being transformed. And the Maras and demons come out and go, oh, that's enough of that. So that's in demons and Maras. And then what about gods? Well, gods are higher classes of beings, if you like. They exist in the Buddhist cosmology. They exist in the sort of upper realms. And there are different kinds of gods, just like there are different types of Maras. And they're also individual and collective. I think of gods, I think of, in the wheel of life, you have gods who just have everything they want. And they're living beautiful lives. And it depends what your form of beauty is, really. So, it might be a really refined lives, having higher states of consciousness and meditation, a lot of bliss. It might be that. It might be that you're just very rich and wealthy and have everything you want. It's like a VIP pass everywhere you go. And you're celebrated in every way. You don't have hardship too much in the God realm. What are our collective gods? What do we worship? So, it could be a celebrity, a political figure. There's something about the God realm. There's two God realms. There's a sort of demigods, and then there's the other gods. They basically like power, status. They like ease and comfort. They in a way, they're very attractive figures because they're successful in what they do. So it means that we're often drawn to them, as it were. We're kind of like, they can be quite charismatic even, drawn to them and think, oh gosh, if I could only, my life could look a bit like that. But the thing about the gods is that they are still deluded because they don't recognize impermanence. They think their status, wealth, beauty, wonderful house, whatever it is going to last forever. So they don't recognize impermanence. And the other thing about gods is that they can become quite inflated, if you like, with all their accomplishments. And they can feel a sense of superiority on others as well. So in a way that they feel separate from others. Other people have a hard time. They're having an easy time. So we don't want to really go for refuge to gods. We can learn from them. There might be AI, AI technology. That might be a god. That ChatGPT, You might be asking about your spiritual practice through ChatGPT. I heard it's being done. We can talk to our friends. That's what I say. We can talk to our friends. So we don't want to go for refuge to these gods. We can learn from them sometimes. But the thing to remember about gods is that they have their own agenda. They want to be in control. They have their own agenda. It might not be in your best interests. It might not be helping you move towards freedom, awakening, because it's still about, on some level, control, and it's still deluded. So these are our gods. So what do we do? How do we work with these? So we have meditation that helps us with an ethics, that really helps us with the maras, our conscious mind, and we're coming into awareness of what's our experiences below the surface with meditation, with ethics, with community. But the thing about the demons and gods is that they're unseen and they lie deep within psyche, deep within the human and collective psyche. So how do we work with these? And this is where the great guru, Padmasambhava, comes in. And he comes in and he's this figure, and he's got all these sort of symbols, all these implements, because actually you need some tools. It's not just wishful thinking and think, oh, okay, just leave me alone for a little while, demon. You actually have to engage, and you need some tools to help you. You need some things. So he has a Vajra. This is a Vajra. He has one of these. And Sadhuketu, this is a diamond thunderbolt. And Sadhuketu earlier was like, imagine holding a diamond thunderbolt. Imagine actually the energy of lightning and thunder, in your hand. And that was the energy you're going to use for transformation, for seeing through your maras and transforming your maras into positive qualities. And then this one's a purba. So this one doesn't have a purba, but this is a purba, a demon dagger. And it's like a peg. So basically with this one, you get to think, you think, what is actually going on in my experience? You meditate, you practice, and you think, I would really want to peg that particular habit down. I really want to see that particular demon. I want it to come into consciousness so I can work with it, so it's not controlling me, and I can come into a relationship with it in some way. And this is what the purba does. It pins it down. It nails it. It stops it slipping back into the shadows, into the unconscious. Yeah. So this is what the purba does. And these are just some symbols. There's lots of them. And what we need to do with symbols then is just engage with them. Hold them in your hand. Yeah. They're nice on shrines, but use them. Hold them. See what it feels like. And then visualize them. We have so many symbols. Visualize them. How does what's going on in your life, how might that relate? Which symbol might it relate to? Which symbol might be helpful to bring in to something that's going on in your life? So engage with symbols, because symbols work on the non-rational, on the deepest aspects of our being. And they're ancient. Some of these symbols are ancient. They go back many years, and they work across all kinds of types of beings because they hold such power. So engage with symbol. And then ritual and devotion. So in a way, in order to again be prepared to meet our demons, to engage with them, we have to have some courage. We have to have a bit of courage, and we have to have enough care and love for ourselves. We want to change, yeah? So our heart, open your hearts, metta, open your hearts. And with ritual and devotion, that really helps us to engage our hearts. It really helps us not just engage what we know about ourselves, but the deeper energies again that are in our being. And with ritual too, you can speak to the different aspects of experience. You might not see gods, you might not see demons, you might not see all the other classes of beings, but you can say, hey, I know you're here somehow. The elements, the earth, you can really connect with all of that in ritual. And when you do, it's amazing. Something happens. something becomes more alive. You feel more alive. There's more of you available when you engage in ritual and devotion. And you begin to have a relationship that's not just about, that's broader, that's actually takes in more of experience. And you bring it all on the path. Whatever's going on, I often say this on retreat, so come to the puja, no matter what kind of day you've had meditating, come to the puja and just bring it all there, whatever you're going on. Nothing's out of bounds. Yeah? There's nothing we have to leave out of our experience. You can bring it all on the path and direct it to progress, direct it to freedom. And then sound, mantra. We had a beautiful sound workshop today, a bath and mantra. We've had invocations, we've sung invocations, we've shaken instruments. We've really brought sound alive. And never underestimate the power of a song, the power of mantra. Mantra is the qualities of enlightenment in sound. And it has an effect on the body. It has an effect, on the unconscious aspects of our experience. One of my most, in terms of power of song was when I was with my mum in hospital. She'd been taken to hospital, and she had dementia, and she had one of the crises that she had, and we was in the hospital cubicle. We managed to get in the hospital cubicle, and she was kind of a bit distressed because we've been waiting for hours, so she started sort of humming to herself a little bit, as she did. And then it was chaotic. Friday night, casualty, really chaotic, short of staff, all of that was going on. And then in the next cubicle, there came a man who was drunk, and he was shouting and swearing. He was caught with his demons, shouting and swearing, and the staff, I could tell the staff were coming in and just going back out because he wasn't let anyone bother. He didn't want anyone to touch him, treat him. And it was a real, just his swearing was really distressing. I could see my mum was getting more distressed, hearing his swearing. So she started humming more loudly. And then, at one point she was humming loudly, he was swearing, and then she started singing. And she started singing, like a bridge over troubled water, like a bridge over troubled waters. And she, at first of all, was okay. And then she got louder and he got louder. And I was just like, oh, this doesn't work. And they wouldn't, that the staff was still, he was still kind of cursing the staff, and she started singing even more loudly. And then it was at a cacophony at one point. And then I thought, what do I do? What do I do? And I thought, actually, she's singing to soothe. She's singing to give herself some comfort. She's singing for peace. So I was like, well, I just join her then, So we started singing. I started doing some harmonies, and then we got quite into it, And we all were loud by this point. And then something happened, because then suddenly I realised that he'd stopped swearing, and there was just a silence. So we carried on singing. And then a little while later, I heard this. Like a bridge. So the three of us were singing together. The power of song, the power of love. My mum had this expression, said, soft words turn away wrath. And she didn't mean soft as in weak words. She meant words with heart, with love. Turn away anger. And that's what he did in that time. Bhante, he says, we have to penetrate to the depths, drop a depth charge and blow up all the primordial forces that are holding us back. And we can do so in song and mantra and ritual and symbol. And then he ends, he gave a very famous lecture here in 1979. And he says, let the demons come. Which I'm like, okay. let's manage this a little bit. Let the demons come. He says, let all the gods and demons of the city of London and the West and the whole world come and be transformed. We're not discarding them. We're not turning away. And that was my learning as well when I was seeing the flags. I was like, remember compassion. Remember metta. And I remember when I learnt the Metta Bhavana practice, I discovered the Metta Bhavana practice. It was like, it was like the clouds had opened and the sun came through. And I thought, it's really possible to love every single human being, regardless of views, regardless of backgrounds. And there's a whole practice that helps us do this. He says one shouldn't be afraid of the gods and demons or of the Dakinis. Even if they do ride upon buffaloes, let them come, but let them be transformed and let them contribute to the energy of the spiritual life, not to be alienated from the spiritual life. So there's a constant struggle between the two. It says to begin with, we have an idea of vision. We have a vision of the spiritual life and the light that we want to grow. But it says sooner or later, though, we have to contact all the deeper, more primordial energies within ourselves and incorporate them on the spiritual quest. Only then will our spiritual lives be rich and growing, not based upon tension and struggle. And we need to do the same thing with the world. It's not that the world is bad or evil or wrong. It's simply that the world's energies, or the energies which the world are so-called, energies of the world, are misguided. Misplaced energies, misplaced attachments, misplaced worship. So they've got to be guided in a direction that is, in the right direction, he says, in a direction that is freeing, that is connecting, that helps them connect with the discarded aspects of themselves, of ourselves, and of each other. And I say, in order to do this, we need the great guru. We need the great guru, Padmasambhava. We cannot necessarily do it alone. We need his presence. We need the presence of the spiritual enlightened forces that are here. And through the grace and blessings of all the teachers that have come before, who've really deeply connected with Padmasambhava, his presence is also here. So let's call on Padmasambhava. Let's call on him with a faithful heart. Ask for our own transformation, the transformation of our community, and the transformation of the world. We need the great guru, Padmasambhava. So let's call on him.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you